Hi, Year 9, it's Mrs. Hudson here doing your second Normans lesson. What we've got is a bit of retrieval practice for you before you start your lesson on Anglo Saxons. Take a look at the 6 individuals in front of you, and if you can pause the video for 5 minutes, and for each person can you write down everything you can remember about the above people. Thank you. Okay, so I can't tell you everything about all of these individuals, obviously, because that would take too long, but just to give you a kind of quick recap on perhaps some of their key points. So starting off with Hippocrates, who was the Greek doctor. Now, at this time, the Greeks believed in gods, and Hippocrates was the first person who started thinking about causes and treatments of the body in a little bit more of a rational way. He actually looked at whether he thought something was wrong with the body and that was causing people to be sick. And if there's something was wrong with the body, therefore you had to treat the body. He couldn't fully explain everything, obviously. Galen, we know, comes afterwards, and he develops Hippocrates' ideas with things such as the theory of opposites. Now, they get around, both Hippocrates and Galen, they get around kind of the idea of God making people sick by saying God made this kind of perfect body, therefore the church sort of accept Galen's and therefore Hippocrates' ideas. But they're both really important because they were both people who started thinking rationally, looking at the body, rather than supernaturally believing that God caused everyone to be sick. Moving on to Vesalius in the Renaissance period. So Vesalius is important because he was one of the first key people to look at the anatomy of the body. So you might remember the story of how he used to steal criminals, take them down, cut up their bodies, boil parts of their bodies to look at what was underneath, and then drawings were created of his findings. Now, this medical knowledge in the long term has been really useful, but in the short term, it didn't have a great deal of impact because people couldn't particularly use it. It helped in some ways because certain things that Galen believed were proved incorrect, because he had obviously been dissecting animals and Vesalius was now dissecting humans, so there was some of his ideas were proved wrong, which prompted people to think about what else he got wrong. But it's been his ideas and his drawings have been really useful in the long term, especially for surgeons who know where different parts are of the body, how things work, how things are connected. Moving on to Edward Jenner, you probably know the idea of how he came up with the first vaccination for smallpox. He was important not in terms of the causes of disease or treatment. He was important in the idea of preventing people from getting a disease. A vaccination prevents someone from getting a disease in the first place. In this case, it was smallpox. Later on, Louis Pasteur would do some work around anthrax and other diseases. Moving on to Florence Nightingale then. She was the person who obviously came into the hospitals during the Crimean War. She cleaned them up, opened the windows, let the air in, spaced out the beds, cleaned the bedding, all of these kind of things. And it wasn't because she believed in germ theory. She didn't even really believe it when it did come about. She believed in miasma. She thought that miasma was causing these things. That was not true, but the things that she did do actually helped prevent germs. So she did help in preventing people from getting sick, maybe not fully understanding why. Louis Pasteur, then, the French scientist who discovered or developed germ theory. Really important. He wasn't very confident at the time, so wasn't really pushing his ideas. He had some men like Charles Bastian to help him, and gradually over time people started to move away from the idea of miasma theory to germ theory. People like Lister listened to him early on, and they started using and developing things like carbolic acid in their surgeries, which helped kill off the germs. And as this proved successful, it meant that more and more people listened to him. Watson and Crick are the last couple. They were the people who drew out the idea of the double helix of DNA taken with Rosalind Franklin's X-ray photograph. DNA was really important and finding out about genetic causes causing things such as cystic fibrosis and diabetes. Moving back then to the idea of Anglo Saxons, and our key question today is why was society hierarchical? So I want you to look at the next task. Are all people in society equal? And I want you to jot down a short list to explain the ways that you think that they are equal and perhaps the ways that they are not equal. And if you can take 2 minutes now, just pausing the video, to do that task. So, ways they are equal. Well, we're equal in certain ways. We all have education, we're equal under the law, things like that. However, people aren't all equal in society. People might have more money, they might have more power, more influence. And this was true today, or it is true today, but it was also true back in the Anglo Saxon period. So our outcome today is to hopefully explain the reasons why England under the Anglo-Saxons was organised into a hierarchy. You might remember from Year 7 that you did the feudal system, which was what the Normans introduced, but we're looking at the hierarchy in society that existed before they came, because later on in this course we'll look at how they changed it. But it's not just understanding what the hierarchy was, who was at the top, who was at the bottom. We're trying to think about, well, why was it set up this way? How did it benefit the king? So our key word here, in case you aren't sure what hierarchy means, the definition is a system in which members of an organisation or society are ranked according to relative status or authority. And the characteristics are there is a structure in place which tells people what they're responsible for, and the aim is that it should mean that everything works efficiently and there is stability in the system. So some examples of hierarchy are the government, within school, and even within your own family. So Anglo-Saxon society was hierarchical, which means it was arranged in a clear order of rank or status. Everyone knew their status and what was expected of them. And as you can see, just on the right-hand side, there is your hierarchy of Anglo-Saxon society. Slaves at the bottom, peasant farmers, ceorls, thanes, earls, and the king. And these are some of the groups we're going to learn about today. So a person's status could increase if they paid for it. A slave could save up and buy his freedom to become a peasant. A ceorl could become a thane if he built up a large enough estate. So a lot of this is to do with money. If you got more money, more land, you could go up the hierarchy. However, people could also move down in status if they committed a crime. So, for example, Anglo-Saxon law ruled that some crimes were made punishable by being made a slave. So you could go up the hierarchy, or you could go down the hierarchy. And our question that we want to think about is, why do you think that society was set up like this rather than everyone being equal? How is this going to help the king? So if you can pause the video here and just have a think about that, jot some notes down for 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so there's some possible answers to this question then, is the idea that there's some competition in here. Everyone's aiming to get further and further up the hierarchy. This means that they will hopefully work hard for the king or work hard for their thane. Whoever's above them, they will work hard for to hopefully get out of their situation and move up to the next level. How will it help the king? Well, each of these people had to work for the person above them usually, or provide some kind of service, which is what we're going to move on to look at now. So you should have a worksheet which has been uploaded with your assignment in Teams. If you look on the top left of the worksheet, there is a pie chart, and you can see that the peasant farmers make up the most of the Anglo-Saxon social system. Thanes make up that really small amount, and slaves make up a decent chunk. On the right hand side there is a quick gap fill if you can have a go at that. That's your first task. The second task is to colour code the information in the grid. If you look at the bottom right, there's some circles, and next to them are some terms: peasant farmers, thanes, slaves, earls, and changing social status. You need to colour code those little circles, and then as you read through the boxes, you need to say where these people are mentioned. So, for example, the first box starts off with Thanes were local lords. There were between 4,000 to 5,000 Thanes in 1060. You need to therefore colour that, the colour that you've coloured the Thanes. You then need to answer the following 2 questions in your book. So the first question is, sorry, Miss Hadley's just walked past and made me laugh. The first question is, question A, what kind of services were provided by the different classes? Add this to your hierarchy triangle, which if I flip back a slide, it is just that triangle there, if you can draw that out. And then what services? So what did a Thane have to do? What did an Earl have to do? Etc. And then I want you to think about, well, why was it important to have people perform these services and duties? Think about perhaps how they would help the king out. Question B, why do you think there was opportunity to move between the different classes? That kind of element of competition we just perhaps talked about on the previous slide, but can you try and use the word control within your answer? How did this help the king control people? That task, should take you about 20 minutes. If you want to pause the video here. The next task then, or the next bit. Historians have different interpretations and different views on what happened, or they might just think that one reason was more important than another. So all of these 3 reasons are reasons why society in Anglo-Saxon time was hierarchical, but different people, or these 3 different historians, have different opinions. So historian A, I think there was a hierarchy to help the king raise an army when needed. Everyone in the hierarchy was dependent on someone else in the hierarchy for their land, whether it was given or rented. And as a result of that, the condition was that they would fight for the king or earl when he needed them. However, historian B thinks, I think that the king needed help running his country. He needed people to collect tax, repair roads and bridges, and help protect his people. He could not do this by himself, so he made sure he had people who relied on him, who would help him to do these jobs. They owed him. Or historian C, I think there was a hierarchy in society to keep people working hard. If they worked hard enough and managed to buy some more land, they could possibly move up to the next class. So what I'd like you to do is to pause it here again in a second. This task should take you about 3-4 minutes, just answering the question in red. Which of the following historians do you agree with most? So A, B or C, make your choice. And justify, well, why do you think that was the key reason? Why was that really important to the king? Your extension question is thinking back to last week. Is there any problems that could be had with this system? Any ways it could go wrong? So pausing here for 3 to 4 minutes. So our last task today then is to bring this kind of work together. And what I'd like you to do is spend 10 minutes using the fragments below, the key words and terms in red, and explain how Anglo-Saxon society was organised. So pulling together all your learning from this PowerPoint. This is a work that me and Miss Bartley will be looking at and will be assessing. So try and go into as much detail as possible. Now, this is not about just telling us the hierarchy and who was above who, etc. It's telling us about how it worked, why it worked, okay? Why was this put in place? Any questions? Feel free to email myself or Miss Bartley. This task should take you 10 minutes and then it will be the end of your PowerPoint. Thank you.